Thank you, Ron, for your response. Yeah, I think maybe we can talk a bit about what election means and what it doesn't mean.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for again, taking a Jewish perspective on election, it's the point of election, right? The point of Abraham's election, Abraham and Sarah's election, is to be a blessing, right? So it's the particular with the universal horizon, right? As John Levinson says, it's not about exclusivity. It's the opposite. It's about accountability, right? And it's extreme accountability. So you don't want to be the elect one if you're in a Hebrew context, because that means if you're not being accountable, you're in trouble, right? So Saul is elected, Saul is rejected, right? And this is the paradigm we see. Adam and Eve are elected. They don't obey the commandments. They're exiled, but God brings them back. They're reelected. And so the point of accountability means that we have this vocation as a species. I am very uncomfortable with the term species, by the way, but I don't know what else to call the human lineage genetically in its particularity, because I think there's a similar tension with the incarnation. Without particularity, how can you have election or incarnation, yet the very concept of election means there's not particularity, because the point is God creates a new people from an old people. And that's why I like election, because it's selection. I read election, I think this is pure Darwin. Founding population, move to another land. God takes Adam and puts him someplace else. Lakal is an election term. So I think this is why I find this a useful category, because it's not a clean break, it's not a revolution, it's not a big bang in behavior. It's a continuity with the old people to bring them back into the picture.
Is it as arbitrary as it seems to me? Could God have chosen someone else for any reason, no reason? I mean, Jacob I have loved, Esau I've hated.
Yeah, God. I'd say with the human lineage, God could have chosen Neanderthals. God could have chosen other hominins. I would say that there's also prerequisites to fulfilling the vocation. So you could say, well, some animal who doesn't have certain capacities that allow these animals to obey God's commandments.
Yeah. Well, see, the more you talk that way, the more we are.
Yes, and that's the long version of the talk. But
exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think capacities are important.
Yes.
Insofar as they, if you can't produce a lineage, then you can say, well, what's your place in election? And God sees that as a grievous, what do you want to call it? A situation that needs extra grace. So when God, the Psalms talk about eunuchs, God says, well, you can't have a lineage in this life, so I'm going to give you even greater lineage, right? And so folks who can't have a lineage are given special grace in that context.
Interesting.
Right? So we could say, what are these capacities? We could talk about what these might be. Do dolphins have them?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So you have
just to play devil's advocate, I'm gonna push back on both you and Ron and say, how do we know that there hasn't been more than one election? You said that God could have elected Neanderthals. Well, is extinction a marker of rejection in the election?
I don't think so. I think there could be. Why not? If we discover Neanderthal scriptures, that'd be glorious. Yeah.
I've always been very lucky in getting theological appointments, and I almost lost my first job when I disagreed with our dean. I'd been reading some of the more dire warnings about nuclear winter, as we worried about it back then, and anyway. The topic that I introduced for our faculty conversation was, is nuclear warfare that could result in the extermination of humanity a theological possibility? And I said, yes it is. And my dear beloved dean from a different generation said, no, it cannot be because of the incarnation. Well, I think I stick to my point of view. The impossible is possible in history.
God's grace is no guarantee of anything in terms of the human future. Might we destroy ourselves? Possibly. Might we replace ourselves? Possibly. Might we engineer our own extinction and replace ourselves with something better? Possibly. I don't think that ends God or ends God's race toward the creation, but it may very well end humanity despite everything I've been saying about incarnation. Do you think about it?
Oh my gosh, there's too much. The thing, so I've been learning a lot from listening to everybody. I'm really grateful. And the reminder of, one of the things of the many things I've loved is the reminder that many of these categories really are Latin and Western in the theological traditions. And so to be reminded of the Eastern and Greek views of some of these things is super helpful. So I like the image of, and Ron, you brought this up. It's not about it's not the divine word becoming incarnate in this individual person who walks around, right? But it becomes, it's almost like the infection of a virus in the social body, right? Is almost like the image. So the divine word infusing. So that brings me back to this though. Infusing what? So I take your point that the older Philippians hymn that uses anthropos is important to take account of. But in this Greek Eastern view, if the divine word is infusing, why can't we say through the human, this goes back to Theology, through the human or the hominin lineage, the divine word is infusing the created order. But I don't know. I mean, I like that idea, but
I don't know that they would have used the word infuse.
No,
that's of course a Latin-based word, and it simply means poured out, which you have in Joel 2 and in Acts 2. I will pour out my spirit. Yes. So infusion, I think, needs to be elevated within pneumatology as a theological category that is maybe not as important or as frequently used as incarnation, but it's a word that has, well, for those of us, all of us who are not the incarnate Christ, infusion is arguably more important.
Yes.
Right? The presence of the power of the divine in the person of the Holy Spirit in each part of creation, including in every human being, but in each part of creation. So infusion is critically important. Well, I mean, there's a whole lot that could be said, but your opening point, I think, is very well taken. The Eastern Church has a richer theological vocabulary on a number of these key issues. I'm not persuaded that that's the answer to everything.
Right.
I'm not becoming Orthodox,
of course.
right? There are lots of reasons not to, in my view. At the same time, there are lots of reasons to get over our provincialism, particularly as a Western Protestant, in my case. We really got to break out of that and embrace this much wider river of ecumenical Christianity. Not to mention all the resources that lie beyond.
Yes.
Right?
Just one comment on the question of unity in diversity. Pannenberg is really helpful there, because for Pannenberg, the Trinity is unity in diversity. Now, he uses Hegel for it. I use Cantor, but that's the design. And it's the Trinity that gives unity to our experience. So we all have a sense of past and future, but they're sort of dissolved into the past. The future comes. But the Trinity offers us the possibility of unifying all those momentary experiences into one experience. And Pannenberg does it through a participation notion. He gets from Augustine. So as we experience time, we participate in God's eternity. And it's God's eternity that gives unity to our discrete temporal experiences. And I was thinking, when Jamie, you were saying something wonderfully about Ron's point about vertical and horizontal unity. Actually, what gives them unity isn't vertical or horizontal. That's where the unity comes from. But I mean, those are the loci we're becoming.
That's right. That's right.
But the unity is as they participate in God.
Yes. Yes.
And that's
Right.
when we're talking incarnation.
Exactly.
So it isn't because we have a mechanism, but because we're taken up into the divine unity in diversity. So
Yeah, that's helpful. The thought occurred to me. I forget what I was reading, Bob, something of yours, not too many weeks ago, and it just sort of hit me. You were talking about time, and the way in which we experience time as linear. Is that really what time is? And the comparison I drew was the way in which the past is present in us. The past of the human lineage is present in us, right? I mean, you and I are sitting here using, in ways we can't comprehend, Neanderthal DNA to have this conversation. So if the Neanderthals hadn't been what they were, we would not quite be here this way doing this thing right now. Are they present? Well, not in the way that you mean as a physicist, but is there some similarity? Do you see any kind of affinity with what I'm pointing to, the presence of the past?
yeah. I mean, the term I use is we remember the past, but the real goal is to re-experience the past in the present, keeping its past as its present, and that comes in eternity. That's what Pannenberg said.
Right.
Ted asked Wolfhard something about his mom or how old was she, and Pannenberg said, well, she's the little girl just born. She's the kid going to the first grade. She's the teenager getting her first dance. She's the bride becoming married. She's the woman giving birth to me, and she's the old woman who just died. And they all held together, not in our time, because they're not. That's the whole point. That's why time is tragic. Because it flows.
Right.
But they're held together in eternity.
And can you just simply draw that out in 7 million years?
Yes.
Not your grandmother, but
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking
exactly.
when I hear
Exactly.
the vertical and horizontal.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a few minutes for Q&A.
Yeah.
Please do this. Please, if you ask a question, make it clear and brief, and please don't make a long essay. Okay, yourself first. Yes.
One aspect of faith which I've heard is kind of like the elephant in the room, and I heard it briefly mentioned by you in your presentation, is evil and sin. I think it was going to be pretty much absent. And how did it come into the world? When did it come into the world? And its implications for almost everything that was said.
Ron, do you want to try that?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Earlier on, I didn't get a response to whom I said I don't have a theory of the origin of sin. The reason for why I don't feel compelled to have such a theory is because of that move from a infralapsarian to a supralapsarian perspective. If you are infralapsarian, then your entire Christian view is built around the incarnation as a response to the fall. So you darn better have an explanation of what you mean by fall and why it necessitates the incarnation. So Anselm and other theories are developed, theories of the atonement. If you take a supralapsarian view, it doesn't mean that you're any less optimistic or naive about the profundity of human evil. Absolutely not. Maybe even more overwhelmed by the human capacity for just monstrous evil, and the capacity of every human being, even the people we think of as the best, to lead bifurcated or split or compartmentalized lives in which all kinds of evil thoughts and desires and behaviors can. So, all right, I want to make sure nobody thinks that I don't acknowledge the reality of evil. I don't have a theory about when it begins, and I don't have the theological necessity of coming up with a theory as a way of explaining atonement. If you take the supralapsarian view,
you still need to say something about evil. And evil, I think, becomes then more of the refusal to allow the grace of the Creator to live itself out to its fullness in that part of the creation over which I have some say. So, do I refuse God more than I allow, more than I say thy will be done, more than I say, use me, O God, make me a channel of your blessing. We all know what we should say, not just in our in the more trivial moments of public prayer, which it sometimes degenerates into, but in the deepest longings of our heart. Do any of us really open ourselves as we should to the fullness of the grace of God the Creator, bringing us to this highest possible awareness and embrace and delight and conformity to the will of God? So that's if I have a theory of sin, it's that. But that obviously doesn't explain all the other stuff that goes on in the world, right? And that doesn't explain why genocide and other kinds of things. I have no denial that those things happen. I have no need, though, theologically, as I see it, to come up with a theory to explain how they got started. Right? Can you go?
Yes.
Yep. Sure. Okay. All right. Can you go?
Yes. I have two brief half comment, half questions. So first, it seems to me that your lineage theory is in more consonance with the theological conception of continuous creation.
Yes.
Compared to what the species-oriented theory does.
Right, exactly.
So I wonder why you didn't explicitly extend your argument in the framework of continuous creation. And second, it seems to me that the new data and also your interpretation strengthens the contingency of the whole creation. What do you think about it?
Absolutely. I agree with you on both points. First point, it would be a lot of work and a lot of time that we don't have here today to develop that connection fully and explicitly, but you're exactly right. But anytime you're talking about Gratio Continua, you're landed right back in the deep, deep, difficult questions of divine action. So, it's a tall order. The second is the contingency of the process. Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of the whole creation.
The whole creation, but even at 7 million years ago, could God have looked at that and seen this? The views of God are at stake, obviously, in that. God's knowledge and ability to predict on the basis of knowledge of the present, or does God indeed have foreknowledge as some of them? So lots of issues going on there. For me, though, with the view of God that I do hold, you're right. This heightens the contingencies upon the multiple contingencies upon which all of the components of our theology would rest.
Okay, I have two questions in the back. Yes, sir.
We are a small part of our universe, and as you're speaking today, I couldn't help but think, what about the divergence, the intergression, the incarnation has on the effect of the entire universe?
Yeah.
And if millions of years from now, what's the answer?
How many minutes left?
Yeah.
Read the book Ted and I are producing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's perfectly consistent with what we confess about God, that God is one God of the entire cosmos, that God is a God of generosity and grace. We know that there are life-bearing planets in the habitable zone, numbered probably in billions. Has life begun? Has it reached intelligent levels at certain planets? Has it even exceeded our own? Probably. Will we become aware of them in our lifetime? Who knows, maybe. Beyond that, I don't want to speculate because I just don't know that I have the theological ground on which to stand, except for these broad affirmations that I've already given. One God for the entire cosmos, a God of generous and abundant grace and mercy. Will God be known to intelligent creatures everywhere in a way that meets whatever drama they've created for themselves? Yeah, but whatever that is and how God does it, yeah.
Okay, please.
Yeah, so I have two questions. The first one relates to the human uniqueness. I've heard a lot about questions such as are we unique or what makes us unique? But I haven't heard about why do you want to be unique? And I wonder if that would change anything. I'm not sure that would change our sense of responsibility towards all the spaces.
Yeah.
And my second question is, I'd like to go back to the three challenges that you mentioned. I think the theological challenges. The first one is still human uniqueness. The second is you have three challenges.
Oh, yes, right, okay.
Incarnation,
Right.
and the third is theological arborescence of racism.
Right, right.
And my question is, how do in which context do you position these challenges?
In which country?
Context.
Yeah.
Do you use one context or multiple contexts for those challenges?
I'm not quite sure.
Are you
Because-
saying are those challenges the same in every context, or are they context specific?
Because I think we are at the stage of problem framing, not problem solving. Which is that when you talk about challenges,
Right.
then you
Okay, yeah. We may have to talk later on that second part. I'm not sure I've got it well enough to take the time here. But the question of uniqueness, you're very savvy to point that out. In a way, the book in particular is a appreciative response to Wenzel van Huysteen. And he emphasizes theological, scientific basis for human uniqueness as a theological correlate of the image of God. I think there's some problems with that argument, and in the book and in the paper I try to suggest that mostly it has to do with the dating of the information that he's drawing on. I think we're different in orientation in that respect. My attention to the word uniqueness is to raise a counter-argument here to Van Huysteen, and to suggest that the human species is not unique in the sense that he wants to use that term. It's not unique in the sense that Ian Tattersall, for instance, has wanted to use that term. It's an overemphasis, an excessive emphasis on an idea. Are we unique in any respect? Well, I'm happy to talk about that. And I have that paragraph in the paper where I say, well, you can talk about uniqueness if you want. You just can't talk about it, I don't think, credibly, as a product of evolutionary biology. I don't think we evolve as a unique species. I think the human lineage stands out as producing a creature like us, but it's a creature within a network of other creatures who are very much like us, and to say we're unique among those other creatures, I think is wrong. So if that's the sense of human uniqueness that may be worrying you, I'm dismissing that. Homo sapiens is not unique among hominin species in the sense that most people have used the word unique. Right?
If you can make it very brief.
First, just a comment on Jay's remarks on the thesis of incarnation and implied speciesism. In the Indian tradition, you do have incarnations that start with fish, tortoise, bull, monkey, and then ends with half man, half horse. So, and there are other possibilities. But my serious question is, as I sit in here, the theological response is coming very much from an Abrahamic, theocentric position. But if there are Martians or perhaps people in other cultures, or Buddhists and so on, who don't have any idea of a God or prelapsarian teleology and so on, what would you say to them? I mean, this theology kind of suddenly spring up after 200,000 years of non-theological development and no awareness of God, and now suddenly sort of sprung on us that there is this, and yet there are, the probably majority of the people on earth have absolutely no idea.
Exactly.
Okay, good question.
Yeah, well, just very simply, I think the burden is on each of us to stand authentically in the culture that has shaped us and defined us, in which we want to continue to shape, and to say what these things mean at the deepest possible level, while practicing absolute openness and respect to the discipline of other people, doing the same thing, listening, then learning from them. I mean, not to over-invoke the metaphor too many times here, but that to me is what introgression at the cultural level actually looks like. And to me, that's what it's allowing divergence and diversity to reach their deepest level, so that when there is transmission horizontally, there's something really deep to share. And I suspect that when we share that, we will find commonalities that we never dreamed of if we haven't gone deep.
Thank you, Ron. That nice description of GQ. You're welcome.
Yes. All right, go to
very great talk. I just have a few questions. So, if I understand correctly, because of introgression and mixing, it seems that Josh and Jamie wants to expand incarnation, and you want to keep it Chalcedonian. But would you say that you want to kind of expand election to the point of birth as universal?
I want to expand incarnation to the entire human, or hominin, I'm using the terms interchangeably, hominin lineage.
But not to all species.
But not, that's right. To me, that's a Lutheran view. All right?
He's not guilty.
Yeah, 10%. I know. Yeah, that's a cheap shot. But for reasons that I said earlier, I don't need that because of the Reformed emphasis on pneumatology and pouring out of the Spirit on the whole thing. The whole thing is in, not by virtue of incarnation, but by virtue of the Holy Spirit. So, right?
Right, so that raises to the second question in terms of supralapsarianism. I don't know Calvinism that well, but I thought infralapsarianism is created so that you don't have this double election issue. There's the fall and there's the response. Supra is there's ultimate providence, you have election and reprobation. But if you're expanding the election so much as that there is no need for fall except there is no collapse, then there is no reprobation. Is that correct? Is that your view?
I think the terms are broader than that. In the Reformed debates, I think what you just said is an accurate description to the best of my knowledge, but I think the terms are broader than that. You don't find that kind of debate going on in Irenaeus, for instance, nor do you find that kind of debate going on in the Eastern Orthodox, nor you don't find that going on in Rana. They're all, I'm lumping them all together as supralapsarian. That's a little bit of a stretch of terminology, but the gist of supralapsarian view is that even if Adam and Eve had not sinned, and I'm adding to that, even if there were no Adam and Eve, God would have become incarnate.
Yes.
Incarnation, anyhow, is actually the title of a book by the guy in the office next to me back in Pittsburgh, Edwin Van Driel. If you want to read a good book on supralapsarian, incarnation, anyhow. But at any rate, so you see what gift that offers. If you can't figure out what to do with Adam and Eve, somebody comes along and tells you, well, Christ would have come even if Adam and Eve, as I want to put it, hadn't been there to sin. Right? So what does Christ do? And that gets back to the earlier exchange. Frees up the creation for completion. Makes it possible for the creation to attain the highest possible awareness of the divine and live accordingly.
Okay, let's thank Ron, our first speaker, for his slides.